Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. It's been a while. We were the Nigerian Startup Bill series before, and now we've moved up and grown up, and we're now at the Nigerian Startup Act series. Happy to be with you again. My name is Yewande Adeosi. I'm the Executive Director, Commercial at Tangerine, looking after our sales, marketing, customer success, and partnerships across the group. And a very strong advocate of the Nigerian Startup Bill and now the Act, and hoping we can have more discussions as we go along to make sure that the Act comes operational and does what it says that we fought for through all the process and getting the bill made into an act. And so we need to make sure we keep our regulators and policymakers on the feet to commit to what they promised to. So this series is about demystifying the Act, letting everybody know what is in store for them, what everything means, how it impacts them. And we have specialists that'll be coming on to talk to us about different sections of the Act. Today's episode series, we'll be talking about the National Council for Digital Innovation and Entrepreneurship and how it will benefit the startup ecosystem. We will be discussing what the functions of the council are, the membership, the powers, the operational structure, and how the market stands to benefit from the council's operations. And on that note, I will just say I will now introduce my panel that's joined me this afternoon. I have with me first, Musa Alibaba, an independent consultant. He's a technology and finance strategist with over 25 years of varied experience. He holds a bachelor's degree in banking and finance from the University of Wales and an MBA from the London Business School, and did an IMP at the Stern Business School of Business, NYU. He's also an alumnus of the African Angel Academy and is helping us to set up an angel syndicate in Abuja. He is a member of the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria and a fellow Institute of Management Consulting. He worked with Pfizer. Oh my gosh, Musa, so did I. Microsoft and Oracle, and as well as the government. He recently was the founding chief executive officer of TZ International, also known as TZ Pay. He engaged himself in activities aimed at growing Nigeria's IDE ecosystem and serves on the board of SFSDH Merchant Bank, Nigeria, and is an independent non-executive director. He is the second cohort of the students of the School of Politics, Policy and Governance, and worked as a joint product manager at MIT REAP, Team Abuja. Welcome, Musa. We're happy to have you this afternoon.
Great to be here today. Thanks.
Great. Looking forward to your contributions. And also joining us this afternoon is Barrister Emmanuel Edit. He holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Calabar, Cross River State, a master's degree from the University of London. He received several professional qualifications in the areas of internet governance, development of policy and regulations in the area of information technology, and as well as legislative drafting in the areas of cybercrime and cybersecurity. Emmanuel Edit started his legal career at the law office of T. Adebola Musa & Co. in 2000 and moved to Oscar Arabian Co. in Jalingo in Taraba State in 2002. He has joined the National Information Technology Development Agency, NITDA, in 2003 as a legal officer and has since risen to the position he occupies now as the head of the legal unit of NITDA. He was also involved in the pioneering efforts of establishing the Nigerian Internet Domain Name Registry, Nigeria Internet Registration Association. He's the secretary of the defunct Nigerian Cybercrime Working Group, Office of the Nigerian National Security Advisor, the secretary of the Cyber Law Drafting Committee, and member of the lawful inception of the Communications Law Drafting Committee. He served as a member of the Financial Systems Strategy 2020 Committee of the Central Bank of Nigeria, and a member of the development of frameworks of blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies, and a host of other initiatives in the formation of information technology regulation. So welcome, Emmanuel, to the panel this afternoon. And just to set the tone, thank you so much. And just to set the tone and to remind us, the passing of the Act was necessary to pave the way for the legal and regulatory framework that serves to give clarity to operators coming to work in the startup ecosystem. So we needed that clarity. We had a lot of backwards and forward a couple years ago with players coming to the market, entering, making strides, and then there'll be policy and regulatory flip-flop. So we needed the policy to make sure that there's clarity of the operations of startups in Nigeria. So on that note, we now have this council, and I've had lots of questions. I reached out to a couple of people on another council. So, and what is this council going to do? So I will just start with asking, what is this council set up to do? Emmanuel, if you can give that overview to us. What is this council all about?
All right, thank you very much, Wendy. Hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you very much. The council was basically established to provide the administrative framework for the implementation of the Nigerian Startup Act. And as we are well aware, the objective of the act is to ensure that the ecosystem of startups in Nigeria are actually sustained, supported, and also promoted. One of the complaints that has come from the ecosystem is the absence of government support for startups. That's number one. Apart from the absence of support, also the adverse economic environment which startups have to operate, because the foundations and the bars that we set for carrying out certain activities in the economic space actually limits its applicability to startups. And so the startup is already 10 steps behind before they even try to operate in the Nigerian economy. And so the Startup Act was designed to mitigate those challenges. And in order to ensure that the challenges are actually addressed, the council was set up. Remember, government has been very, very reluctant to establish new agencies, not only because of the cost, but a lot of times because of sometimes conflicting functions and responsibilities among the agencies. And so the best thing to do was to establish a council which basically has a legal personality like any other government agency, enabling it to have the requisite powers to actually follow up and implement its activities. Specifically in the Act, the council is provided for under Part 2. Section 3 establishes the council as it is, while Section 4 actually defines the membership of the council, which is all-encompassing, so to speak, members of the ecosystem, members of the government. In fact, it's at the highest level because the president is the head of the council. The vice president is also a member, the minister in charge of communication and digital economy, those in charge of finance, budget, national planning, industry, trade, investment, science, technology, innovation, the governor of CBN. And then we have representative of the Startup Consultative Forum, because the thought around this structure was that where you have a specific council that's supposed to be for the benefit of a certain area of the economy, those people should also be provided the opportunity to participate in the governance of their own space, especially when it comes to initiatives that will assist in the growth of startups in Nigeria. And then, of course, we have a representative of the Confucius Professionals Registration Council of Nigeria, which is basically the body that handles professionalism in the area of computer knowledge and standards. And then there's the Director General of my agency, NIDA, who is going to be the secretary to the council. So that's just basically the makeup of the council. And what is the council expected to do? The council is expected to formulate policies for the realization of the objective of this particular bill. So whatever needs to be done in terms of government position, in terms of government initiative, in terms of government's approach to ensure that the bill, the act, so to speak. Sorry, we've spoken about the bill for so long and it still runs across my mouth. So the act, it is now an act, just to clarify, it's not an act and it has been passed into law. So to formulate policies for the realization of the objective of the law, and then give direction to the Secretariat. So basically, the Secretariat, which is NIDA, is going to be the implementing organ, so to speak. You don't expect some of these members of the council to do the day-to-day running and maintenance of the objectives of this act. So NIDA will have the full responsibility in collaboration with stakeholder participants from the ecosystem to ensure that these goals are achieved. But they are going to be supervised by the council, who have members from the ecosystem. The council is also supposed to have a sort of monitoring and evaluation mechanism to ensure that all its objectives are actually monitored, the implementation is carried out timeously, and then it also articulates the implementation by several other organs of government. Let's remember that a lot of organs of government have also gotten their own initiatives to help and support startups. So the council will at some point be able to look at all these various initiatives and then support them, make pronouncements on them. Also, the council will have a council agent. The council agent will basically be the monitoring and evaluation, should I say, officer for the entire project, and will report directly to the council on the activities of the council and the secretariat as well. One other aspect which is also very important is that the council is supposed to also provide a framework and support for some seed funding that will be made available to startups, because one of the challenges of starting up a business in Nigeria is actually having the kind of funds that you will require to have the basic foundation. So there is a provision for funds in the Act, which will be managed by a funds manager. In this instance is the Sovereign Wealth Fund. And then, so the council also make recommendations governing those funds and how they can be applied in some instances. So in a nutshell, that is just what the council is all about. And its main aim is just to support and promote the objectives of the Act. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. That was a very thorough overview of the structure of the council and what its role is in this enabling startup environment. But I'm going to come back to Musa, as I'm going to take you like the operator in this conversation, and Emmanuel will be like a regulator type situation. So now we've heard the structure and all these different parties that are part of it. Do you think it's set up to really drive change? I mean, we know many government councils are made up of everything, the president and everybody's involved, and then doop. Do you think that we're going to really see a lot of change based on how it's, well, based on its structure and how through Emmanuel's explanation, it's really set up to deliver change?
Yes, so I think that's the intention behind it. I think there are critical aspects for people to perhaps understand. When we look at, and again, coming from the operator's perspective, when we look at the challenges that startups have, especially with regard to government, they are not uniquely focused on any single agency. They come across a multitude of them, and it's policies that have happened historically in silos. So in the absence of tackling those silos, whether it's problems with funding, whether it's problems with education, whether it's challenges with intellectual property, and so on, it would not be one single agency that could handle it. And it would we wouldn't want to see situations where agencies are in conflict with one another over how to tackle those issues for the interest of the startups. So having a council where you have the president, the vice president, ministers from various ministries that have in one way or another an impact on startups, and the central bank too, from the government side, and NIDA, is very important, because issues can then be tackled on a sort of interministerial basis. Also, we have the, if you will, private sector operators, the consultative forum, which ensures that startups themselves in the ecosystem have a mechanism by which order to have them tabled in the council. And so the consultative forum serves as their representatives to make sure that issues that arise from time to time are also brought in addition to the members of the bodies, the professional bodies for computer professionals. Now, the thing is this, there is also in the nature of startups and of the startup ecosystem, it's a fast changing environment. The law or laws typically are static, if you will, and take time to change. So you're going to have a situation where things come up from time to time, and you need a quick mechanism to address those things. Waiting for a law or waiting for amendments to the law is not a possible option. So the law, as it is, the Act, gives that flexibility for the council to take policy positions on issues as they may arise. And that's a very important part. The third part I'd like to make about this for operators understanding is this. If you go through the Act, there are several critical elements. And in each of these elements, the council has a role to play. So it is essentially, it takes an eagle-eye view of the issues pertaining to the startup ecosystem. It has a role to play in the management of the secretariat or the functions that the secretariat takes. It has the council agent, as earlier mentioned, that ensures that monitoring and evaluation and the goals of the Act are being carried through. It has a part to play in the administration of the portal, which is also to be managed by the secretariat, but which also has is going to be the direct element that the ecosystem sort of interacts with, and the processes underlying them. So if we are going to have situations, and we've just come out of an election where technology has proven to, has shown some challenges. In the process of managing this portal, there are likely to be issues, there are likely to be points that are raised. We need to make sure that, of course, quality is delivered in terms of those startups that are labeled. And so you're going to have to create some policies and process improvements as you go from time to time. And you don't need to go back and write a new act to do that. The council is in a position to be able to take that. So for to sort of make things short, the aim of the council, the structure of the council is intended to reduce the silo effect. It's also intended to make sure that the Act is, to an extent, future-proof, and it also has the representation and the access for the ecosystem. It presents the access for the ecosystem to engage with the highest levels of government to ensure that issues pertaining to the ecosystem are also dealt with.
Thank you so much, Musa. That really brought it home for me. I like the whole point of it being future-proof, and I like the fact that it's flexible. It's built in to not have to wait to go back to the House and go back to Senate, all that work we did last time in terms of trying to pass the bill. Because like you mentioned, the startup space is running at the speed of light, and we know government is more like a very patient turtle. So it's very good to hear that it has that power to sort of keep going, address issues, discuss, and keep going. And there's a lot of accountability in there in terms of monitoring and evaluation through the M&E council agent, and also this coordinating role it's going to play. So with these powers that we've just mentioned, now that we don't have to go back to the House and the Senate to address issues, should founders be wary of these powers now? Who should I go to? Do I do it to the operator or to the? Okay, I'm going back to Emmanuel. You've got all this power in this council. Should founders be wary of your power? Of the council's power, not yours in particular, but the council's power?
No, I don't think so. Because they are members of the council in the first place, because they do have representatives in the council, and the whole essence of them having representative in the council is to ensure that at every point in time, whatever discussions go on in the council that eventually result in a policy direction or a resolution that will affect the ecosystem, they are afforded the opportunity to contribute to the ecosystem. In fact, if you look at the constitution of the council and the meetings of the council, it basically says in the, I think that's in the first schedule, or I think somewhere later in the law, I think it's the first schedule that governs the meeting of the council. It basically says that the council shall not hold any meeting if the private members, meaning the members other than government members, are not in attendance. That means the council cannot form a quorum or hold a meeting without adequate representation from the private sector members. So it doesn't really put power on government. Rather, it provides a platform that supports the growth of the ecosystem within the context of ensuring that the issues that require to be addressed are actually addressed. That's number one. And then number two, if you look at the way the act itself is structured, the Secretariat cannot carry out any initiative without reference to the council. Again, that's another governing mechanism to ensure that all activities around startups are actually well coordinated. Like Musa Ali Baba mentioned earlier, a lot of activities in the area of startups and even government regulations are actually done in silos. And that's because the Establishment Act of various government institutions actually gives them absolute powers in the areas of their focus and specialties. Where the problem arises is that the way the economy is interconnected, especially the digital economy, your activities in your focus area may adversely affect the activities of, say, businesses in other areas that are not specifically within your scope. And we've heard complaints a lot about multiplicity of taxes. And then, of course, you can get pioneer status from an agency, and then another agency doesn't recognize that pioneer status because it has a mandate to make sure that it generates certain amount of revenue annually. So this causes some sort of conflict. It is expected that as far as startups are concerned, as long as you're a registered startup, because the Act refers to them as labeled startup. As far as startups are concerned, your interests should be protected by the council, by the structure that is going to be set out with the council, and then also to ensure that in whatever activities you're doing, you are afforded the opportunity to benefit from programs that have been established by government. Of course, I'm sure somewhere along the line, schemes and programs and projects will come out, and initiatives that will afford some form of protection from some of the harsh and adverse consequences of some government regulations, even if it's on a temporary basis, to ensure that the startups stand on their feet. So basically, I do not think that it throws power at government, but rather it gives government the opportunity to sit down with stakeholders and actually address issues that affect and debilitate against the establishment of startups in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thanks, Emmanuel. I think what I really took home from your conversation is this coordinated effort, because we all know different agencies doing different things, wonderful in their own silo, but when you bring it all together, completely destroys all the efforts across the board, negating everything. So if we have that, bring it all together. You're trying to do this, I'm trying to do that. Okay, maybe take out number 4, number 3 and 5 are good. We do it all together. We will make an enabling environment, as opposed to the typical that we see that in isolation, it's great. When you bring them all together, it just negates everything everybody's trying to do. So I think this is going to be great if you guys, if the council can have that coordinating effort to have visibility on everything everybody is doing and bring it all together to say, before we start, let's all agree which one's your own, which one's my own. And when you bring it all together, it all makes sense. I think that's going to be a very important role for the council to make an enabling environment for startups to thrive.
Absolutely.
So on that note, I'm going to ask Musa a question that I think everyone in the ecosystem would want to know, because everything is about priorities. What do you think if this and when I will ask Emmanuel, when is this council kicking off, or has it kicked off? But we'll come back to that. Just think, ruminate on that little question. But Musa, if this council was to kick off, right, what do you think it should prioritize first? What are the top 3? I don't want to have 10. Let's not do a 9-point agenda. What do you think it should pick as the first couple of things to do as soon as it kicks off?
Very well. I think already as stipulated, for the ecosystem, the key thing to see that the Act has gone into implementation is the portal. And so it's very necessary that that is kicked off, and the management of that is seen to be transparent and fair. The rules around how startups get labeled has to be clear. So those two go hand in hand. I think the appointment of the council agent is also very important. That body must be independent, and it must be credible, because to your earlier question to Emmanuel, should the ecosystem be wary? If the council agent is there, and if the proper monitoring metrics are already in place and clear to all, and there's a body that is evaluating these things, then the impacts of policies as they may appear can be proven. And that can be another channel by which to give credibility to claims of the ecosystem that a certain action, a certain policy, a certain initiative has had, to some extent, it could be very effective or have limited impact. And so it's very important for us to ensure that the portal and the council agent are in place. But very, very important, because of the way that the Act is structured, is the consultative forum. The consultative forum defines certain requirements. I have to be honest and say that there are some practical challenges to at the initial stage for the consultative forum to wait for it to be fully fledged and then fully choose a set of representatives. And so we have to be practical about that. I think that there are credible bodies and individuals in the ecosystem that can start up this role prior to a full-fledged consultative forum coming in place that would be acceptable to the majority of the ecosystem. So that's one technical hurdle that critically we have to be able to address. And I have to put it out there transparently to everyone so that we understand that, even if it is expected to be this way based on the Act, for all practical purposes, because the consultative forum representation needs to be in place for the council to sit, then we have to navigate through that in a manner that is practically viable at this time, but with a proviso that in the medium term, it is fully fledged. So those are the 3 things that come to mind right now to show that implementation is underway.
Thank you. So you said priorities kick off the portal, the appointment of the council agent, and the formation of the consultative forum, whether through an interim group and then we go into the larger group, and that's right. But just to bring everybody back, in case people don't know, what is this portal that you are referring to?
Very well. A lot of the implementation work will happen through the portal. The portal basically is the channel through which A, players in the ecosystem would be registered, B, startups would apply for labeling, because you have to be a labeled startup to get the benefits of the Startup Act. And there's going to be a process for labeling and evaluating those that are, credible for labeling that has to be spelled out by the council. And then down the line, other players like investors, research and developers, intellectual property registrars, and so on, that impact the ecosystem. All of these actions and all of the activities pertaining to them would also interrelate through the portal. And beneath all of that, of course, should be data to show us the progress that is being made along the way. So the portal is a very critical element of implementation, because it is the transparent avenue by which the ecosystem can see, how far along we go, what benefits there are, what additional incentives come up, and how the policies that affect us are working.
Thank you so much, Musa. That really gave, it's really important, this portal, because it gives transparency to the whole ecosystem, from the players to the investors, to even the regulatory bodies, and then the data that'll be churning in terms of who's getting labeled, how many people are getting labeled, the frequency of people getting labeled, who's getting registered, who's getting funding. I think it's definitely the structure of that is definitely going to be pivotal to the enablement of the Act and the council itself. On that note, I just say another thing in terms of now. Back to you, Emmanuel. Where are we with this council?
That is a very interesting question. The thing is, in establishing the council, we encountered some initial challenges, and which I will try to explain a little because of the provisions of the law. First of all, the law requires that the council, before it's properly constituted, requires to have its private members, and which would include 4 representatives from the Startup Consultative Forum. Now, the Startup Consultative Forum cannot be established unless the portal has been established. In the same vein with the provisions of the law, the portal cannot be established unless it has been approved by the council. So we as the Secretariat faced a huge task and challenge of how to get a council that cannot be constituted without a certain membership, and that membership cannot come into the council without the portal existing. So we had to comb through the provisions of the Act to see how we can find a way around this. And one of the provisions of the Act empowers the Secretariat to get administrative approval from the President on the implementation of certain aspects of the Act, and which is what we have done so far. So we are hoping that, of course, you are aware that this, at the moment, the government is really embroiled in the elections, and so a lot of other activities have taken the, let me not say backbone, they've taken less priority in terms of actually having activities. So we have sought the approval of Mr. President, which he has granted. We are currently working with some stakeholders in developing the portal, where we need to get some people on board to have a consultative forum. We also are awaiting the approval of a multi-stakeholder national committee, which will constitute of members of the private sector, interested people from the startup ecosystem, who are going to come together and have the initial discussions, like Musa mentioned, about who and who will go into the SCF, that's the Startup Consultative Forum, as the initial members before we can now formally constitute the council. So as things are now, we are targeting that the council should hold its first meeting at least in early second quarter of this year. And from there, we can now stabilize all the basic requirements of the law, because we are also trying to be careful. We don't want someone to wake up one day and say, oh, you violated this section of the law, and so whatever you have done, because there are people who are ready for that. So whatever you have done is illegal, and those kind of things. So we have a target date, but it's not within our powers on achieving that particular target date. But we are pushing as quickly as possible. We've done all the paperwork. We are hoping that the portal will be ready shortly, probably before the end of this month, and then we'll proceed to ensure that the SCF is set up and members are selected that will go into the council for the council to hold its first meeting. Thank you.
Okay, audience, you heard it here. The tentative date, Emmanuel, did I put that right? Tentative ideal date for the first council meeting. It would be the early Q2 of the
Yes.
so second, so let's I've got my fingers crossed here. I think everybody, let's have our fingers crossed. So and I think it's so important. I think there's no one that ran that hasn't established the importance of the startup ecosystem in developing our economy. So I think it's a nice little brownie point for whoever leads us going forward. So hopefully we can just remind them of that when they settle in real quick, that this is a low-hanging fruit. And that's how we need to really sell it to them, that don't worry about this. This is pretty much done. You just need to just rubber stamp it and let us get on with what we need to get on with. And you can continue with what you're getting on with. So we hope that we can get that ear with them very early as things progress in the next couple of weeks. So on that note, I'd like to ask Musa, okay, we just established we need the meeting to happen early Q2. So, but apart from that, what message do you have for the federal government regarding the implementation of the act?
From my perspective, it's very important for the government in the implementation of the act and for all people involved in its implementation, that the public and the ecosystem in particular see the processes that emanate from it being transparent, see action on it as being serious, and also see the resolution of issues that arise as being taken for priority. When this is done, it improves the confidence that the ecosystem will have in the government, and vice versa, I think, in return. We have this challenge where, frankly, there are elements of distrust between the ecosystem and the government, and justifiably so in many cases. But that doesn't need to be so. For the ecosystem, for startups to become vibrant in Nigeria, the government and the private sector must be working hand in hand. And in addition to them, the academia and other stakeholder groups as well. So it is very critical to show through the council and through the implementation of the act that there is a responsiveness on the part of government, and that the startups are very intelligently channeling issues forth to be tackled. So it's not just that we're, in a sense, complaining on Twitter while not really doing anything about it in the real world, but that we're using the avenues that have been opened up by this act to really bring benefits to the ecosystem. And I think finally, the truth is that there's innovation going on all across the country. It's not, limited to just a few places. We need to also be seen to be making an impact for innovators across the country, especially in the smaller cities that we have, so that this urban or hyperurban or shall I say mega city concentration is not perceived to have come and dominated everything. I think it's very important, and it also, in a sense, reinforces for young Nigerians the prospects and opportunities that arise in being innovators wherever they may be. And down the line, I do envisage that there will be other considerations that come in, because, in previous discussions around the act, whether online or offline, some people ask about the, emphasis on digital innovation and what about others? This is a fair question that we will have to ask and address over points in time. But let's make this work, because making this work opens up the avenues for those innovating in non-digital spaces too. So it is important for all of us, from my side, from the government side as well, that we use this channel very effectively. The more we put it to work, the more we test it, the more we iterate towards stability. The quicker we do that, the more effective it will be for others that are starting up their businesses. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to get more there because there are no jobs there are not enough jobs to accommodate the population. So we all need to take it seriously to ensure that we get the best outcomes from this. But having said all of this, I would also be fair and balanced in saying that we need to make sure that we're putting a quality to the work that we do. Just because we can apply as a startup to be labeled does not mean we should make sure the applications through the portal. The more information, the more quality of information that we provide, the better the chances are for the ecosystem as a whole. And I'll leave it right there for now.
Thank you. So a couple of things I took note from what you just said in terms of it's a two-way street. The operators have to also, bring their issues to the council, coordinate it, make sure that it's for the majority and it makes sense, and we're not bringing frivolous things that you might do when you're just posting, randomly on social, but something that really is going to make impact. And two, another responsibility of the ecosystem operators is that because you have the opportunity to apply for something, make sure that it's deserved. You put the effort in to provide enough information that it won't seem that the council is rejecting every application for startup status, as opposed to if you provide. It reminds me of my time in Afina, when you get grant applications and you're just like, if this person just applied themselves a little bit, this would be a lot easier. So I think this is what's going to really come through, because we don't want a situation where people go to Twitter, 100 of us applied and 100 of us got rejected. And it's not because of outright. So that transparency that you mentioned is going to have to be clear in terms of sometimes the council has to go back to the market in terms of this is what we're seeing. And this is why you are either getting accepted or you're not getting accepted. And we want more, there'll have to be continuous engagement from what you're saying to really hone in, because we all think that everybody can apply for a job application. And then we all know what we see when we're reviewing job applications. So it's the same thing, that continuous engagement of training, what needs to go into an application, business support services might be required as well. Because I'm a startup founder, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm the best writer of an application, right? So that support might need to be included as well. And on the regulator side, again, it's the transparency, taking things seriously, how we get the issues out there. I think cascading the data into stories is going to be really important, really telling what the council's doing in the public fora. How can there be white papers put out from what was being seen so that people know that this is what's happening in this, the council, and what we're seeing through our applications to the portal, and who we're labeling, and what sort of R&Ds coming through, what sort of jobs are coming, that impact, because I think we need to show impact on multiple facets to make this whole council and the act viable and seen worth government's time to prioritize, because that's what we're asking for our second quarter meeting, in terms of you guys get in the chair and please allow us to do this, have our council meeting. So definitely the storytelling that comes out of this is going to be really critical to making the Startup Act and the council viable for everybody to maintain interest. And that's what I'm going to ask one last question, or a couple more before we go. That maintaining interest. Now, the presence of ministers and other policymakers on the council, does it help or does it hinder, Emmanuel? Because we've got to keep them, I kept saying just now, telling the story, keeping them interested. They've got a million policies they could be, or acts they could be following. So presence of ministers and other policymakers there helping us, or, what do you think?
I think they're helping us. I think the whole essence is that we've learned over time, for policies to succeed or for initiatives to succeed, there has to be a buy-in at the highest level. And where there is no buy-in at the highest level, it is extremely difficult, because these are the decision makers as far as implementation of these policies are concerned. And so they have to be at the, should I say, at the venue where these policies are being discussed in order to understand the value and the importance of this particular policy. The president signing this bill into law clearly shows his interest in ensuring that at the highest level, the ministers actually participate in decision-making and policy drive that will ensure that the startup ecosystem basically thrives and succeed with the support not only of government, but the entire ecosystem. And I know Musa mentioned something about innovations across board and across the country, but also there is innovation across organizations, because some of the steps that are being taken by government today would not have been envisaged previously. Government is a rigid bureaucracy. You don't just break some molds. But for me, it's kind of innovative to be able to sit on the same table with those that are going to be affected by the policy and ensure that you take input from them for policies that actually affect them. It's a new way of making laws, so to speak, to ensure that those who are going to be affected by the law have a say as far as the law is concerned. So I think it's a plus. For me, it's a plus when you have people seated at the table who are the ones who take decisions and drive policies. They will eventually cascade this policy based on the structure of government, cascade these policies to the implementing agents and ensure that they are absolutely implemented for the benefit of the entire ecosystem. So that's an added plus, and we hope that as we continue, we'll be able to bundle one or two issues from our interaction with the various sectors of the economy and ensure that we coordinate from the council's perspective, the ability to have a coherent policy direction that will actually ensure that startups are protected until they eventually grow. Remember, this is just for startups only, not for grown men and big companies. Thank you very much.
Oh man, but thanks for that, Emmanuel. So I'm just gonna, oh great, I'm seeing a question. So that's what I was gonna go to see if we have any questions, and one seems to have come in. So the NSA is really good. I followed its journey, it's commendable, it's completed the journey from bill to an act. Although section 13 of the act clarifies this act, the tech focus, it's a missed opportunity, I feel. Could the council update the act to include non-tech focused startups? Also, section 13 could make sole proprietors have the same rights as limited liability companies. I'm going to hand that over to you, Emmanuel. I know you mentioned that, it's first focus, and I think Musa as well mentioned it's first focus on tech startups, but you guys want to address that? Who wants to go first on that question?
Okay, I think I'll just go first on the question. The thing is this, it's focused on tech startup because it was tech oriented when we started talking about startups. The essence of tech startup is because right from the establishment of NIDA way back in 2001, Nigeria had a vision that if we were supposed to leapfrog into a competitive economy, we needed to focus on technological development because it seemed to be an easier way to go from step 1 to step 100, since it's basically intellectual, in order to achieve our goals as a country that will be competitive in the global economy. And recently we've been talking about actually, instead of considering JAPA as a brain drain, we'll consider it as intellectual export, so to speak. So the point is, this act is totally focused on tech startups, and unfortunately, the council cannot amend the act. If we would like to amend the act to include every other startup apart from tech startup, it will be a bit of a challenge because that would be a huge. It will be a huge constituency, and that goes beyond the tech ecosystem. So the council cannot actually change the focus to non-tech focused startups. That's number one. On the second question about sole proprietors having the same rights as limited liability companies, I think the the law that governs business registration in Nigeria is the Companies and Allied Matters Act. And that law specifically talks about different types of businesses. You can be a sole proprietor, you can be a limited liability company. Why I think, well, I wasn't among those who actually drafted the law, but why I think we focused on companies is because we would like startup to be a group of people. We recognize the fact that entrepreneurs may not necessarily have the business acumen to actually, tech startup, those with ideas may not have the entrepreneurial acumen to be able to push their ideas from inception until commercialization. And so there's a need for you to have some sort of team. And then there's also the risk that if you're relying on sole proprietorship, what if the person is no longer there? What happens to the effort that has been put into his product? So there has to be somebody to carry on the flag. Unfortunately, some of these things actually do happen. So I think basically the idea around it is that it has to be a group. It may be led by someone. Yes, we actually accept that in terms of the act. The act actually accepts that. But I think the focus on companies is to ensure that it is an artificial, or should we say commercial entity that can be commercialized, that it will eventually have the product in the market. I don't know if Musa has something to add to
that. I think I subscribe to what you've said. I would, if I had anything to add, just to Idris's question, it would be to say that even in cases where a product may, or an innovation may have seemed to be, non-digital, you find that there are digital aspects towards its development. For example, digital design, use of CAD or tools like that. In the case of this is what I think these are elements that people want to see, the application of digital technology, largely because it speaks to the efficiencies that would be gained in the design and production of such innovation. So, I believe that these are elements that can be looked into. Secondly, on the council sits the Ministry of, or the Minister of Science and Technology and Innovation, which is a body that also has a hand in those that are in the non-digital space as we speak. And I'm sure that that ministry that is there represented would be able to have input into certain aspects of implementation of this act for the benefit of those innovators that it covers. These are, the application of digital technology is varied and can be deployed in many different ways. I'll just speak, for example, in health tech. As you would know, when it came to vaccines production, the innovation, the product was the vaccines, but the process that went through it had a lot of digital elements through it, especially in the mRNA, developing the mRNA types. So, I would not despair too much, Idris. I think there are ways of looking at things on their merit and creating avenues to ensure that those industries are also successful. Because at the end of the day, the purpose of this act is to minimize failure in our startups and to maximize the potential for Nigerian innovation to succeed. And that really, I think, that point should not be lost on us.
Thank you, Musa, and thank you, Emmanuel. So to Idris, to Musa's point, if you put e-commerce on a traditional business, you've gone digital. So just think about that. And like you said, e-payments, you've gone digital. So there's so many ways to add a lot of digital elements that just take you out of that traditional, what seemingly seems like a food business. Make it e-commerce, deliver the food via digital. You're now a digital company. I'm going to take another question from Tracy Okoro. How is NITDA as the Secretariat hoping to sustain the momentum that the project garnered whilst the bill was being prepared for passage? This is in reference to the fact that the bill got the attention and support of many because of its inclusiveness of all stakeholders. Let me just see if this other, so that's one part of her question. The second part is also attempt to answer this question. The idea behind creating an act for tech-enabled companies is saliently pushing for more companies and solutions to move to leveraging technology to deliver its products and services. So I think she speaks to the point we just made. So let's go back to her first question. NITDA, as a secretariat, how are you going to maintain the momentum garnered during the, while we're trying to pass the bill? And how are you going to demonstrate inclusiveness of all stakeholders? Emmanuel, that can only be for you.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a very interesting question, because even before we were saddled with this responsibility of managing or supporting the council in the implementation of the Startup Act, NIDA was already evolving into a fully stakeholder organization, and we are still taking steps at that. And like Musa said, there is, and we admit it sincerely, there is a lot of distrust in between the government and, should I say, the public or the ecosystem. And unfortunately, we are labeled government. So it would take more effort on our part to try and move across that barrier of distrust. Now, but having said that, we totally understand the issues around the enactment of the Startup Act. And we have seen how the movement, let me call it the movement involved every single stakeholder, which provided a buy-in and created a momentum that quickly pushed forward the passage of the bill into law. And we totally recognize that. And one of the first things we did was to see how we are going to have an initial multi-stakeholder committee that will comprise of literally almost every member of the ecosystem that were involved in pushing forward the Startup Act as it is today. Now, we expect that committee, once it is approved by the president, to be able to midwife our activities as far as the implementation of the Startup Act is concerned. And we through the Startup Consultative Forum, because we don't expect the forum to be an organization that stays on the portal. We expect the Startup Consultative Forum to basically provide us with the stakeholder and inputs that will eventually amount to the policies that will be implemented by the Secretariat under the Startup Act. So we are open to engagement with stakeholders periodically or on any platform as much as possible. In fact, I think last month we had a discussion at our management level, even though I'm not supposed to share this in public, and we decided, we observed, we had an observation because we did a critical analysis. We observed the reluctance of engagement from the stakeholders anytime we invite them. And in analyzing the reluctance, we concluded that it's because they are so used to coming, giving us input, and then nothing actually happens. So we decided that, okay, we are going to go out there, we are going to scout. We are going to look for places where our stakeholders hold their meeting, and then go there and meet them and actually engage them there. And we feel that's a more efficient way of actually trying to break down that barrier of distrust. So we have turned a new leaf. We are trying to push of engagement with the stakeholders, and the way the Startup Act was pushed into law is going to be the same way we are going to approach its implementation under the supervision of the council. So every stakeholder will be involved. All we are asking for is just answer us when we call. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And Emmanuel, and to your point, Tracy, we also have to be involved in making sure they make this transparent. We have to keep them accountable. The reason why the startup bill passed, if you guys recall, is that we were on them all the time. So I think we mustn't do the typical thing. We've gotten one thing through and then everything tanks down. I think maintaining that intensity by the ecosystem and all the stakeholder groups that were very pivotal to making the bill pass into an act have to maintain that intensity until we see what we want to see in the ecosystem. Passing the act and passing the bill passing into an act is only one part of the journey. We must make sure that all the aspects of the act get operationalized. And that's only happens if we keep those responsible accountable. So we must maintain that intensity to make sure that what was promised is delivered, and we get regular reports like we said through the portal that will be giving, and the M&E the council agent that will be doing the monitoring and evaluation as it gets executed. We must demand if a report is 1 day late, we need to be shouting, where's the report? So we have to set those milestones and deliverables very clear from the get-go. We expect a report on the first of every other quarter, then second of the month is late. You know what I mean? So we must make the teams, NITDA, and all the council members accountable. That's what I would just add to what Emmanuel has said, from us as consumers of what needs to be passed and implemented. So we've run out of time, everyone. I didn't know, we thought we'd do this in 45 minutes. We've gotten to the hour. And I'd like to thank our panel, Musa Ali Baba and Emmanuel Edit, for really breaking down this council, because I even had a question from someone who said, what is this council going to do? And another council. So I think we've broken down, there's a lot of responsibility of this council and a lot of responsibility for the ecosystem and the inputs that are going in. And the way like everybody, fingers crossed, we want the first meeting of the council to happen at the beginning of the second quarter. So we're hoping this is a priority of the new administration. They've said it is, so we hope they maintain that. And I think it's a low-hanging fruit for any administration coming in. Look good. Support this act. And so to that end, I'd like to thank all our guests this afternoon and taking the time out to join us. And we'll be continuing the discussions as we break down the act to explain each component and the importance to the ecosystem of startups as we go forward. So thank you. And this was great to be with you. Yewande Adewusi here with Musa Ali Baba and Emmanuel Edit. So thank you all and have a great afternoon. Thanks.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And bye for now.
Bye for now.